This happened just a few weeks ago. I'm Dr. Chen, a 34-year-old resident, and I had just finished a long day shift. I was staring down a night shift at our local hospital. Usually I felt okay with night shifts. The routine was familiar. But that night, I had a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. I can't stop thinking about what happened. The hospital was mostly quiet when my shift started. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting strange shadows in the empty halls. I made my rounds, checking on patients and organizing charts. The work kept me busy, but it felt eerie. There's something unsettling about a hospital at night. You could hear a pin drop, it was so silent. Around 2 in the morning, I noticed something strange. I walked past the ICU and saw an empty bed that shouldn't have been vacant. The monitors linked to it lit up suddenly. They blinked and beeped like someone was supposed to be there. I stopped, feeling a chill. I quickly checked the chart. No one was assigned to that bed. I shrugged it off and moved on. Later I heard footsteps echoing in the corridor. I paused, listening closely. They weren't loud, but they were there. I walked down the hall thinking I'd find someone, but nobody was there. My heart raced as I realized I was alone. I convinced myself it was just the stress of the night. Then came the papers. I'd walk back to my workstation and find medical reports tossed around. I knew I had left them organized. I asked a couple of nurses about it, but they hadn't been in my area. Their puzzled faces only added to my growing concern. It may not sound like much, but it unnerved me. And those phone calls. Call after call from nurses about patients I had never heard of. I told them they must have the wrong resident, but I could hear their confusion echo through the line. I hung up, thinking I was losing it. Maybe it was just the lack of sleep messing with my head. Then there was that last night. I stepped into the hallway and saw a figure at the end. It was just standing there, still as a statue. I called out, asking if they were okay. Silence met me. I walked closer, but there was nobody. I felt ice in my veins. Now I can't help but think about that empty bed and the restless footsteps. I'm not sure if it was just my mind playing tricks or something more. It was as if the hospital itself was watching me. I still can't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone that night. Every time I step into the building now, I remember. I remember the silence, the calls, and that figure. It haunts me. My next shift came around, and I dreaded it. I thought about calling in sick, but I pushed that thought aside. I needed to get a grip. I had patients to care for and lives to save, even if the hospital felt off. I put on my scrubs and braced myself for another long night. The moment I stepped through the entrance, a heavy silence greeted me. I shook off chills and headed straight to the break room. A couple of nurses were chatting, and it felt nice to see friendly faces amidst the fear brewing inside me. As I grabbed a cup of coffee, I asked them if they'd experienced anything strange during the night shifts. They exchanged glances, hesitating before one of them finally spoke. "Last week I heard whispers coming from the old surgical wing," she said. "You know it's closed for renovations. It gave me the creeps." I felt a knot in my stomach. The old surgical wing was notorious for stories of hauntings, but I never paid much attention to those tales. Until now. The unease spread through me as I thought about how close it was to my usual rounds. I tried to focus on my work, but every little sound made me jump. I finished my rounds and found myself dreading the next trip through the corridor that led to the surgical wing. Something compelled me to go that way, though. Maybe I could face my fears. As I walked towards the closed-off area, the fluorescent lights flickered even more than usual. I stopped at the entrance where a sign read, "Authorized personnel only." My heart raced. I took a breath and pushed the door open. The air was stale and oppressive. I stepped inside, immediately feeling a drop in temperature. That's when I noticed something on the floor. It was a small white object. I bent down to pick it up. It looked like a surgical tool, but it was old, rusted, and definitely out of place. My skin prickled as I turned it over in my hand. What was it doing here? A sudden noise made me jerk my head up. A loud bang echoed from deeper in the wing. I froze, adrenaline rushing through me. I could practically hear my heart pounding in my ears. I took a step back, preparing to flee. But then, I heard something else. A voice. It was low and muffled, barely discernible, but there was no mistaking the urgency in it. I couldn't just leave. I had to see if someone needed help. I crept further in, my feet hesitant on the cold tile. The voice grew clearer. I followed it until I reached a door at the end of the hall. I pushed it open, but I found only darkness inside. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered out completely. I felt panic grip me as I fumbled for my phone. I turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness. My heart pounded as I turned slowly, scanning the room. That's when I saw it. A figure just beyond the edge of the light, standing still and watching me. My breath caught in my throat. This time I didn't say a word. I just stood there, frozen, terrified that whatever it was would move closer. I wanted to escape, but my legs felt like lead. I had to know what was happening. I could feel the tension thick in the air, yet the figure didn't advance. It just stood there, watching me. I was sure it could see the fear in my eyes. And then it spoke. "I can't help you if you're afraid," the figure said, its voice a whisper that seemed to echo in the darkness. I strained to see more details, but the beam from my phone barely illuminated it. It didn't move, just remained a silhouette, unmoving and hollow. "What do you mean?" I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. "Who are you?" "I was here once," it replied, barely above a whisper. The air grew even colder around me, biting through my scrubs. I took a cautious step back, unsure if my instincts were steering me right. "Were you a patient?" I asked, my curiosity battling my fear. "No." The voice held a weight to it. "I was a doctor." I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't the time for ghost stories, but the urgency in its tone made me hesitate. "What happened to you?" Silence stretched before it answered. The truth was hidden, behind the walls of this hospital. The words hung heavy as if they carried more than just a narrative. I took another step back, the desire to flee almost overpowering. "What are you trying to say? What truth?" The figure shifted, and I felt a gust of cold air wash over me. My instinct screamed at me to run, but something in me wanted to stay. "You have to see. You have to understand." Before I could ask anything else, a sudden mechanical screech pierced the silence, and the lights flickered back to life. The figure, now fully illuminated, was a mere shadow of a man in a lab coat. His eyes, if that's what they were, had an emptiness that sent chills coursing through me. Then just as quickly as he appeared, he faded. I blinked and he was gone, leaving nothing but a lingering coldness in the air around me. Heart racing, I stumbled outside the room, almost colliding with the doorframe. "Calm down," I muttered to myself, but the panic wouldn't subside. I needed to know more, but every instinct told me to get out. Should I tell someone about what I just saw? Would they believe me? As I backed away from the surgical wing, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It startled me, and for a moment, I thought it was a message from another realm. I fished it out and looked at the screen. A missed call. From my supervisor. The clock read 3:15 a.m. I hurried back to the break room, suddenly aware of the eerie stillness again. The nurses were gone, the coffee pot long forgotten. What had happened while I stood frozen in that dark room? Had anyone noticed my absence? I needed answers, but now a new dread blossomed. I turned to leave, but stopped short when I heard that same low voice again, echoing off the tiles. "Find it, and don't be afraid." I was alone but felt watched. My heart raced as I stepped out of that cursed wing, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to face. What truth did that ghostly doctor want me to find? The urgency swelled within me as I reached for the nearest phone. I had to talk to someone before it was too late. The break room was a small refuge, but it felt strangely claustrophobic. Shadows leaned in from the corners, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unwelcoming. I decided to call my supervisor. Maybe he would know about the figure I saw, or at least offer some comforting reassurance. I dialed the number, and it rang and rang without answer. My stomach tightened. There was no voicemail either. Frustration bubbled up. Was everyone gone? Unable to stand still any longer, I stepped back into the hallway. I needed to find someone. The hospital should be crawling with staff, but all I heard was the hum of machinery mingling with my own footsteps. My breath quickened. It was like walking through a tomb. Maybe they're in the offices, I whispered to myself, even though I knew there was no one to hear me. I walked down a corridor leading to the administrative offices. The silence was absolute, each step echoing off the walls. As I turned the corner, I spotted a flicker of movement down the next hallway. I froze. It was a figure moving just out of sight, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears. "Hello?" I called, straining to catch a glimpse. No response came, no footsteps. I hesitated but was overwhelmed by a mix of dread and curiosity. It could be someone who had answers, or maybe even a nurse who could help me process what had happened. Cautiously, I followed the movement, my footsteps soft against the polished floor. I rounded the corner and discovered an empty nurse's station, the monitors dark. The chairs were pushed back as if someone had just stood up, but no one was there. That's when I noticed a door slightly ajar at the far end. It led to storage, a place for old equipment and supplies. I felt a pull towards it, the urge to know more about whatever secrets lay hidden inside. I approached the door, but as I reached for it, the lights flickered again, buzzing and dimming. "Maybe I shouldn't," I muttered, hesitating. My hands trembled as I pushed the door open, the creaking sound unbearable in the stillness. Inside, the air felt damp, and the shadows grew deeper. A rustle came from the back of the room. I jumped and squinted into the darkness. "Is anyone there?" No answer came, just the echo of my voice fading into the shelves lined with medical supplies. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced down. It was a text from my supervisor. "Call me. Urgent. We need to talk about the missing reports." Missing reports. I hadn't seen any reports. "What's going on?" I whispered to myself, feeling the weight of something dark creeping in all around me. Determined, I stepped further into the storage area, scanning for answers. That's when I saw it. An old file cabinet, half hidden behind a stack of boxes. Dust covered its surface, but the handles gleamed as if freshly polished. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the cold metal. This could be it, the truth the doctor mentioned. My heart raced as I pulled the first drawer open. Inside was a mess of papers, but one file caught my eye. It was marked with red ink. Privacy Violation Investigation. I opened it, breathless. The pages were filled with names, dates, and unsettling notes. I flipped through it, my heartbeat echoing louder in my ears with each name I read. But then the lights flickered one last time and went out, plunging me into darkness. My phone buzzed in my palm, and a chill ran down my spine. Someone was in the room with me. I stood frozen in the pitch-black room, barely able to breathe. My phone light flickered like a dying ember, illuminating only a few feet in front of me. The shadows felt alive, creeping closer, and the air thickened with something unnameable. "Who's there?" My voice trembled as I strained to hear any signs of movement. My heart raced not just from fear, but from a primal instinct to flee. I turned my phone to face the direction of the rustle. No one, just empty shelves and forgotten medical supplies. "Get a grip," I scolded myself. This was a hospital, not a horror movie. Yet doubt haunted me. The files felt too significant, too dangerous. I quickly shut the drawer, but a sudden noise made me freeze again. Someone whispered my name. It was soft at first, a ghostly echo, yet impossible to ignore. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Come out." Silence enveloped me. Maybe it was just my imagination. I took a few cautious steps back toward the door, heart pounding louder now. But then I heard it again, this time closer, more insistent, almost as if it was right behind me. "Get out." I whipped around, only to find the room empty. Panic surged. I dashed toward the door, fumbling with the handle. It turned easily, but as I stepped out into the corridor, I felt the cold grip of fear still claiming me. I emerged into stark fluorescent light, yet the emptiness of the hospital was disorienting. I glanced down the hallway, my eyes searching for any sign of life. I needed help, but all I saw were shadows and deserted chairs. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted flickering lights at the far end of the corridor. A break room, maybe? Desperation drove me forward, each step echoing like a drum in the silence. As I approached, I spotted a figure at the counter, their back turned to me. Relief washed over me. Maybe they could explain what was happening. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, quickening my pace. But as I reached the entrance, the figure turned sharply. My breath hitched. It was a nurse, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice shaky. "You need to leave, now." "Why? What's going on?" I pressed, confused. Before she could answer, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness once more. I grabbed my phone, but the screen had gone black. Complete silence followed, thick and oppressive. I felt the air shift, and a sense of terror gripped me. Then I heard it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving swiftly down the hallway toward us. My mind raced. What was happening? I looked to the nurse, but she was gone. Only the creaking of the old hospital echoed in my ears, and a deep unease settled in my stomach. I needed to get out. As I turned to run, something slipped through the shadows behind me, a dark shape darting forward. I bolted down the corridor, heart racing as I called out for help. But no one came. The silence was overwhelming, and I felt the weight of a presence following me, urging me to run faster. Where was everyone? What had I stumbled into? The questions piled on top of each other as I sprinted, desperate to escape the nightmare that enveloped me. I raced down the corridor, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder, adrenaline coursing through me. I had to find a way out. The shadows darted behind me, and I could almost feel the chill of whatever was pursuing me. I reached a junction in the hallway and skidded to a halt. To my left, I saw a set of double doors labeled Emergency Exit. It was a beacon of hope. I dashed toward them, but before I could reach the handle, a loud crash reverberated behind me. My heart dropped. Whatever was following me was gaining speed. I whipped around, bracing myself for the worst. Nothing stood there, just the oppressive darkness closing in around me. I could almost convince myself it was my mind playing tricks. But the whispered warnings and that sinister presence made it hard to shake the fear. Just as I turned back to the exit, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. A flash of white flickered from down the hallway. I squinted through the dim light. Was it the nurse? I needed to know. Maybe she could help explain what was happening. I hesitated, torn between the chance of escape and the possibility of finding someone who could tell me the truth. Curiosity pulled me toward the flickering light, urging me forward. I jogged toward it. Much to my horror, it led me deeper into the hospital. The hallway turned and twisted, each corner inviting me into the unknown. Finally, I arrived at a small room marked Archive. The light was emanating from inside. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling, and pushed the door open. The sight before me stopped me in my tracks. The space was crammed with stacks of boxes and dust-covered files, but the light flickered from an old desk lamp that was on, illuminating a single sheet of paper. My eyes fell on it. The top line read, Case Number 743A, Unexplained Anomalies in Patient Recovery. My hand instinctively clenched, even as dread coiled in my gut. The words felt important, crucial even. I took a step closer, desperate to make sense of it all. Suddenly a voice broke through my thoughts. "What are you doing here?" The shock made me jump. I turned to find a man standing near the doorway. He was tall, dressed in scrubs, but his demeanor was anything but welcoming. "You shouldn't be in this part of the hospital. It's dangerous." "Who are you?" I stammered, pressing backward against the desk. "What's happening?" He stepped forward, urgency in his eyes. "You need to leave now. It's not safe. They're watching." I felt my breath quicken again. This wasn't a nightmare I could wake from. This was real. The shadows were more than just darkness. They were a threat. "Who's watching?" "Everything," he said tersely, glancing over his shoulder toward the door. "I've seen things you wouldn't believe. You need to go before it's too late." I felt a bolt of panic surge through me. A noise broke the silence outside, heavy footsteps like the ones I had heard earlier. The man's expression shifted from urgency to fear, and in that moment, I realized I had only moments to decide. Without thinking, I dove behind the desk, the dim glow casting long shadows as I pressed myself against the wall. I could hear the voices now, low, unintelligible murmurs creeping closer. That was when everything went dark. I opened my eyes to find myself in darkness. My heart raced as I struggled to regain my bearings. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. I blinked a few times, waiting for my vision to adjust, but nothing changed. It was as if the shadows had swallowed the room whole. I pushed myself off the floor and felt around for the edge of the desk, my hands brushing against cool metal. The faint glow of the desk lamp had vanished, leaving me in a void. Panic bubbled up inside me, urging me to move. I had to find a way out. I tiptoed cautiously, trying to avoid any unexpected obstacles. Each step felt precarious, the air thick with dread. My mind raced. Had they found me? Whatever watched from the shadows was close, and I could hear hushed whispers again, just outside the door. I grasped the doorknob, my hands slick with sweat, and turned it slowly. I pushed the door open just a crack, peering into the hallway. At first, all I could see was darkness. Then, I spotted a faint light flickering at the far end, accompanied by muffled voices. My curiosity mingled with fear as I stepped out of the room. I had to get closer. The light pulsed gently, almost inviting. I moved down the hallway, careful not to make a sound. With every step, the whispers grew louder. I strained to catch the words, but they felt just out of reach. Suddenly, the light flickered violently. I froze, holding my breath. The shadows around me shifted as if something was moving in the darkness. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but the pull of the light was too strong. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment and opened them again, forcing myself forward. As I approached the light, shapes began to form. I could make out figures standing in a small group, their backs turned to me. As I got closer, I noticed they all wore scrubs, just like the man from the archive room. My heart skipped a beat. Were these the ones who were watching? Then one of them spoke. What if they find out? It was a woman's voice, panic lacing her tone. They can't know what we're doing. Another voice chimed in, deeper, more authoritative. We have to finish the procedure, no more delays. We can't risk exposure. My blood ran cold as realization hit me. They were discussing me. Whatever was happening here, it involved me. I took another step back, my feet stumbling on the edge of a pile of debris. The sound echoed, cutting through their conversation like a knife. Did you hear that? The woman said, all anxious energy now. The figures turned, their faces hidden in shadow, but I could sense their focus shifting toward me. Adrenaline surged through me as I spun around, sprinting back the way I came. Fear fueled my speed. The idea of being trapped in the archive room again was daunting. But as I rounded the corner and reached the door, a sharp voice called out behind me. Stop! You don't know what you're getting into. I hesitated, my hand ghosting over the handle. I realized even in my panic I needed answers. But at what cost? With every muscle in my body screaming to flee, I made a choice. I twisted the knob and flung the door open, stepping back into the archives where the darkness felt somewhat familiar, even if it was hardly safe. Then a crash echoed outside, shaking the walls. My heart raced as I scanned the dim room for anything to protect myself with. That was when I saw it. A glint of metal protruding from a nearby box, something that might just help me survive. I lunged toward the box, my hands trembling as I pulled it open. The metal gleamed under the faint light spilling in from the flickering bulb above. It was a scalpel, sharp and menacing. I gripped it tightly, feeling both empowered and terrified. I had no idea where this was going, but I knew I wouldn't go down without a fight. Then I heard footsteps approaching. They were heavy, deliberate. My pulse quickened. I ducked behind the box, clutching the scalpel in a white-knuckled grip. The voices from earlier were getting closer, tinged with urgency. We have to find her before she finds out too much. The woman's voice rang through the corridor. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't look in my direction. I peered around the edge of the box trying to see who was coming. Two figures stepped into the dim light, their scrubs distinct. The first was a man, his face obscured by shadows but his posture radiated authority. The second was the anxious woman from earlier. "We don't have time for this," the man said, scanning the area. "If she learns about the project, everything is at risk." My mind raced. Project? What project? They were clearly in a hurry, and I could sense their desperation. The sound of their footsteps echoed ominously as they moved past my hiding spot. Once they rounded the corner, I exhaled shakily. I had to make my next move. With every instinct screaming at me to flee, I hesitated. Whatever they were up to, I needed to know. Gathering what little courage I had left, I slipped out from behind the box. I glanced down the hallway. The flickering light continued to taunt me, illuminating a door on the far end. It felt like the only place to go. But I wasn't sure what lay beyond it. As I crept forward, the corridor felt strangely alive. Shadows danced around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My grip on the scalpel tightened as I sprinted toward the door, afraid they would come back at any moment. I reached the door and pushed it open, expecting resistance. Instead, it swung wide, revealing a room bathed in sterile light. The air inside was unsettling. Beeping machines and stark white walls surrounded me, making it feel like another world entirely. In the center of the room lay a gurney, its surface pristine. But it wasn't the gurney that caught my attention. It was what was attached to it. Vials and syringes lay scattered across the countertop nearby, and a notebook was left open, its pages filled with frantic scrawled entries. I glanced over my shoulder before stepping inside, heart pounding with equal parts fear and curiosity. What had I stumbled into? I approached the notebook, its words jumping out at me. Subject has shown unusual resilience, potential for irreversible changes. Before I could read any more, I heard voices again, louder this time. They were back. I had only moments to decide. I could hide or confront them, but I needed answers. Just as I was about to retreat, the lights flickered one last time, and then everything went dark again. The darkness swallowed me whole. My heart raced as I stood frozen. The faint hum of machines filled the silence, and I could barely make out shapes in the gloom. It felt suffocating. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. With trembling hands, I fumbled for the scalpel, ready for anything. I edged toward the wall, trying to feel my way around, but every sound made me jump. I couldn't let them catch me. I couldn't let them know I was here. I strained to hear their voices, but they were muffled now, echoing somewhere down the corridor. Then a sudden crash shattered the stillness. It reverberated through the darkness, sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through me. I couldn't stay here. They'd come back. I took a deep breath, forcing my legs to move. I stumbled away from the gurney, trying to think. I needed a place to hide. I pushed through a door at the back of the room, my intuition guiding me into another dark space. It smelled sterile, like the room before. But there was a heavy air, as if it had been unoccupied for longer. A faint light flickered from somewhere in the corner, illuminating the edges of a small, cluttered office. A desk piled high with papers caught my eye. I edged closer, hoping to find something useful. There were folders labeled with numbers, and among them, a photo slipped to the floor. I picked it up. The image was haunting. A woman with eyes wide with fear, her face bruised and marked. Below the photo, words scrawled in red ink read, "Incapacitate her at all costs." I froze, a chill creeping down my spine. Who was she? And why did they want to incapacitate her? I tossed the photo aside, searching for answers. The papers were dense with equations and project names, but they meant nothing to me. Nothing made sense. I was in deep, and whatever was happening here was worse than I had feared. I took a step back, feeling the need to breathe when I heard it again, the footsteps. This time they were closer. My pulse quickened as I ducked behind the desk, my knuckles going white around the scalpel. The door swung open and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't notice me. I peered out just enough to catch a glimpse of the man from before, his face now illuminated in the dim glow. "We have to find her, now," he said, urgency lacing his voice. He stepped into the office and scanned the room, eyes sharp like a predator. I scrambled back, heart hammering. I needed to make a choice, stay hidden and hope they left or make a break for it. My instincts screamed at me to move, but a part of me was paralyzed with fear. Just then, the power flickered and cut out entirely. An eerie silence engulfed the room, but it didn't last. I heard shuffling. Someone was closer. With no time to think, I bolted from my hiding place, adrenaline propelling me forward, raw terror guiding my path. I had to get away, now. But as I dashed out the door, I ran straight into the woman who had been with him. Just as I opened my mouth to scream, I realized she wasn't alone. I didn't have to look back to know they were behind me. I pushed through the doorway into the next room, but it wasn't the relief I expected. Instead, I found myself in a small, dimly lit closet packed with medical supplies. Panic clawed at my throat as I pressed against the wall, breath hitching in my chest. Where did she go? I heard the urgency in the man's voice, followed by hurried footsteps approaching. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I clutched the scalpel tightly, ready to defend myself if need be. I held my breath, straining to hear their conversation. She couldn't have gotten far, the woman replied, sounding frantic. We need to find her before... Before what? I thought, but the rest of her words were drowned out as they drew closer. With no way out of the closet, I forced myself to stay still and quiet. My gut churned with dread. What were they planning? Why were they after me? I recalled everything I had seen. The shadows, the whispers, the incomprehensible dread that hung in the air like a thick fog. Suddenly, the closet door creaked slowly open, and I glimpsed the man's silhouette, barely illuminated by the light from the hallway. Instinct kicked in, and I lunged past him, bursting into the corridor once more. "Stop!" he shouted, but the adrenaline surged in me, propelling me forward. I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to. I darted around the corner, the cacophony of my pounding heart eclipsed by the echo of their pursuit. Desperate, I raced down the hallway, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I spotted double doors ahead marked with an emergency exit sign. Hope ignited within me as I sprinted toward them, the sound of footsteps behind me growing fainter as I reached for the handle. But as I threw open the doors, my heart sank. The world beyond wasn't what I expected. Instead of fresh air, I faced another dimly lit corridor, as eerie as the one I had just fled. I hesitated, torn between fleeing into the unknown or turning back. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts, but there was no time to analyze the situation. I plunged into the corridor, the sound of my footsteps echoing ominously. As I moved with urgency, the light began to flicker again, casting unsettling shadows that seemed to dance around me. I walked past rooms with cracked glass windows, portraits of past doctors and patients staring vacantly back at me. Its oppressive atmosphere made every instinct scream for me to turn around and leave. Suddenly I came across an open door. It led into a dim examination room. I hesitated only briefly before diving inside, desperate for a hiding place. The room smelled stale and dust hung in the air. In my frantic search for cover, I heard the telltale footsteps approach. I slipped beneath a gurney, desperate to remain unseen. Time seemed to stretch while I listened to their footsteps resounding ominously down the hall. "Where did she go?" the woman hissed, her voice tinged with frustration. "She's around here somewhere. We can't let her find out." The male voice trailed off, and I held my breath. "What if she sees the truth?" she replied anxiously. "Then we do what we must," he said flatly. "No risks. We must contain her." My heart raced at the threat hidden in his words, settling heavily in my gut. The truth. What truth? What were they hiding? A sudden scratching noise interrupted my thoughts, and I glimpsed light spilling in beneath the door. They were about to enter. I needed to act now, plan a way to escape before they found me. Choosing impulsivity over careful thought, I pushed away from my hiding place, tiptoeing toward a window. It was slightly ajar. With one swift motion, I forced it open wide enough to slip through. I felt exhilaration mixed with dread as I stepped outside into the cold night air. It was surreal to find myself in an overgrown courtyard behind the hospital. The moonlight shone through the joints of the trees, creating a hauntingly beautiful scene. But I knew I couldn't linger. As I darted along the weathered path toward the exit, I heard voices behind me, closer now, searching. "No, she's getting away," the woman shouted. The fear surged again. I dashed faster, moving toward the fence that bordered the property. The gnawing uncertainty propelled me forward, a visceral urge to escape whatever darkness lurked behind those walls. Just as I reached the gate, I paused. Caught between the safety of escaping the hospital and the weight of the truth I still didn't understand. The call of the night air urging me onward, urging me to forget and run. But I couldn't shake the intuition that I needed to find the answers, to uncover what lay behind the shadows. I hesitated. The voice of the doctor from the surgical wing echoed in my head. The truth is hidden, behind the walls of this hospital. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, and snatched the scalpel from my pocket. Maybe this was more than just survival. I turned back toward the shadows of the hospital, adrenaline coursing through my veins while a cool wind whispered around me. Maybe it was time to confront the darkness. I may not understand everything that had happened, but I knew deep down that the haunting truth awaited, and with that single purpose, I stepped back inside. What I would find I couldn't foresee. Unseen forces loomed large in the stillness, and each moment felt like entering a fever dream tethered by tangled lies. What happened next could change everything, or leave me lost in the echoes forever.